and unfortunately, I wish more of the townspeople would know what was going on there because a lot of them wanted to report things that the whole system closed ranks against them, and so they had no recourse. Uh, Except for years later, I'd hear a former matron uh, talking about a male um, coach who was fondling girls in the gym, and she reported him, and the superintendent there just basically said, you know, it's your word against his kind of reaction, and they made it very clear she was no longer welcome to work there. And she lives today in the town of Wrangell. Her name is Lovey Smith.
Wow, whistleblower.
Yeah, even before I think there was a term.
So then later in your life, Patrick mentioned that our friend, Patrick Anderson, in a visionary way about how to release some of this trauma. And he mentioned that there were speakers like Gabor Mate, who's quite famous for his work with ayahuasca.
I have to clarify, actually, my wife who worked for Patrick, and she was the director of her division that brought in Gabor Mate and Vincent Filetti from Kaiser Permanente and Eduardo Duran. They all came in a conference that my wife organized while Patrick was there, and it was quite enlightening to learn the that everything that we were talking about has a context in historical trauma, and it with that understanding, there's an understanding that it's going to require a lot of healing that has to take place. Um, yeah, my wife is correcting me. It was the management team,
Patrick and us.
Patrick and them. We learned from Vincent Filetti about the ACEs study, which is, as you probably know, is the adverse childhood experiences. And there's a series of 10 questions that, depending on how many you answered positively for, could give you an indicator of, or could be an indication of health-related issues later in life. And I have to say, I answered 9 out of those 10 questions. And I have type 2 diabetes. I have a condition called FSGS for short. It's a focal segmented something. Basically, my body thinks my kidneys are alien life forms. It's an autoimmune disease. I've had numerous bouts of um, pneumonia. I have, they scoped out my stomach one time and they saw where I had multiple lesions from ulcers, uh, which, by the way, caused me to go into the ER a couple of times with some of my ulcers erupting and me losing massive amounts of blood. I have had half of my thyroid taken out already. So that's just an example of these later health issues that occurred, and I'm a firm believer that there is a strong correlation between the ACE study and the trauma that one experienced as a young person and as a youth to later health uh, issues that many of us up here are kind of in a similar boat. A lot of hypertension, heart attacks, strokes. Um, we got sort of indoctrinated into eating processed foods, salty foods, and sweet uh, foods that a lot of us craved that and started drinking. I started drinking as well for a period of time. Uh, but and I started acting out. I didn't know why I was disrespecting my wife and my family and my kids and thanks to my wife, I went to therapy. I went to counseling and went to talking circles and healing circles uh, and I was able to share my story, which was difficult to share. A lot of secrecy, a lot of shame. Um, but after unburdening myself, what a freedom I had. And I've been so impacted by that early life that I started gravitating towards helping others try to find ways to heal for themselves. I got involved with the AFN sobriety movement up here, which became the AFN wellness movement. AFN standing for Alaska Federation of Natives, by the way, which was a catalyst for starting all of this. I'm currently the president of the National Native American Boarding School Healing Coalition. If you go to our website, boardingschoolhealing.org, you'll see all the things that we're doing in terms of trying to heal, and but also we're trying to get legislation passed called the Truth and Healing Commission bill. It received about 28 co-sponsors in the Senate from both sides of the aisle, which is a good sign. It's really problematic in the House because of all the dysfunction that's going on there at the moment. They don't even have a speaker yet, as far as I can tell. And when I testified before Congress a year and a half ago, I remember some of the questions that were asked of me had suggested to me that there are groups out there that are concerned about what could happen if that bill passes, right? So one of the things we want in that bill to stay in the bill is subpoena power, because giving this commission power, we could compel church organizations, for example, to open their archives and their data for study and review and survey and that kind of thing.
Was Wrangell Institute church run or federally run or state run?
It was federally run. However, the administrators at Wrangell, every fall, just like clockwork, after all the students had arrived, and that took a couple of weeks process too, by the way, of getting them all down there. They would invite the local denominations in the town of Wrangell to come out, and we all got divvied up.
Oh,
So I know they tried to make attempts to have some of the children go to some of the churches that their parents went to if they had a church, similar church in the town. But if they didn't, of course, it was, they just kind of put us here and there. For example, my mom was a Quaker, part of the Friends Church. But there was no Friends Church in Wrangell, so we were assigned to the Southern Baptist Church. And I like to say, in my best Southern accent, and I never been the same since.
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of like that. We were forced into these church groups that met Sundays and Wednesday nights, and we had to learn the books of the Bible, the Old and the New Testaments. We had to learn scripture. We had to learn a lot of these things, and we got punished too if they thought we weren't paying attention, or those kind of things. And I remember the spiritual abuse part of it came when a lot of them, told me that my mother was practicing Satanism because she spoke her language and she did her traditional dances. And when you get that kind of indoctrination when you're that young, I was 8 years old until I was 14, getting that almost a daily, or if not weekly, reminder that my mother was evil and was a devil worshiper. You kind of tend to start believing some of that. At least I did. I remember going home in the summer times, and I know there's that natural inclination of teenagers to start trying to separate from families. But in my case, I could be with my mother during the day if we're at home, if we had a home, by the way. But I didn't want to be seen with her in public.
Oh.
If I saw my mother walking down the street in Fairbanks, I would go across the street so that I would avoid being seen with her in public. Because I started believing what they were saying about my mom being a devil worshiper. Which I know, of course, it was all totally wrong to do that. And it took me a long time to get over that idea. And my mom never understood why I was trying to separate myself from her. She died in 1974 at the age of 55 from cirrhosis of the liver and from her alcoholism. And, I never did apologize to her for my own behavior. And these are the kind of things I shared in some of those therapies and counseling and talking circles about my own behavior and how much ashamed I was. And I did learn a lot about the fact that it's really not, it was never our fault. It was never ours to bear because we were children, for one thing. And that we didn't need to be carrying around all this shame and guilt and secrecy and I found it quite liberating when I started understanding that I didn't have to carry that around with me. So, but the hardest part was the forgiveness part. I could look back and I have a hard time forgiving certain people at Wrangell, for example, who did all kinds of crazy things, either to me or something I witnessed down there. Of course, it was equally difficult to forgive yourself.
One thing that I found in this podcast, we've been dealing with the use of land and mining and all this stuff. And often that happens on the backs of Native Americans, if you will, in Arizona, in California, in Nevada. I mean, just ripping up huge tracts of land, and these are places where there are burials and evidence of lifeways and habitation and things like that. And I can't help but think that this kind of trauma is additionally impactful, you know. And so in a way, you know, the treatment of Native Americans in this country hasn't changed very much.
I'm glad you brought that up on the environmental side and on the land side. There's still a story unraveling here. If you were to read the Organic Act of 1884, that was the first piece of national legislation that was geared toward Alaska after Alaska was purchased in 1867, that created some sort of a legal system to accept mining claims.
Mm-hmm.
And to register mining claims, and of course, in 1884, we were not even considered citizens until 1925, right? 1924.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when they created the Organic Act, it was basically for the non-native people in the territory to bring some kind of law and order. But also to record mining claims. And some people are using the Organic Act they think that some people were using that legislation as a way to get rid of Native people who happen to be in and around those gold finds,
Mm-hmm.
mineral areas. Like Nome, Alaska. If you think about Nome, before the discovery of gold on the beaches there, I think they said that there were maybe 200 or 300 Inupiaq people living there along that area where they call Nome today. Within a few years of discovery of that gold, there was over 20,000 white people that descended into Nome, and it displaced all of the Native people that was living in that area. And some believe that there were groups of Native organizations that used something that must have been used in prior other states or other countries, where it took 4 or 5 people to declare someone mentally ill.
Mm-hmm.
And got them removed. Robert, you should know that in Portland, Oregon, there's at least 5 cemeteries, all connected to one another, that's associated with with over 5,000 Alaska Natives buried there, to a place called Morningside, which was a mental hospital in Portland. It was a mental institution, and there's speculation that a lot of Native people were adjudicated by these lay people in the communities who wanted the land. And so there's pockets of land in Alaska that where people were removed. Places like Nome, I mentioned, St. Michael's, Fairbanks, Juneau, Alaska, and other mining sites scattered all over Alaska. which, by the way, happened to be very close to other Native people who lived in and around those places, that it kind of makes sense how they could use this law to, basically get rid of people.